What up? Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. I wanted to make a video kind of introducing anybody that's new to 3D modeling and SketchUp or Unreal Engine specifically. Introducing you to the programs. I'm drafting out a course and I'm looking for some feedback to figure out what it is people actually want to learn on top of what I know that I will be teaching, plus what I think might be useful. But I do see a lot of interest in 3D modeling and game development, level design, but also in architectural visualization. And I believe there are some people who are a little bit intimidated by both Unreal Engine and SketchUp. And I think that this video might help answer a few minor questions, plus get the ball rolling for you. I'm using SketchUp Pro, and normally when I open up a new project, I go into either simple or architectural. And if you have SketchUp, I recommend you follow along or come back to this video later and just kind of replicate this process that I'm about to share with you. And I'm going to do some simple modeling just to show some of my techniques, some of my shortcuts, some of my methods for keeping a project organized and making it easy for me to translate a SketchUp project into a Unreal Engine scene. A couple things to consider. I use PBR materials. You can browse the internet and find a lot of those for free. You can find some on the Fab Marketplace. In many instances, you can create your own, but since most of the people that I'm targeting here are probably fairly new to 3D, it's probably best that you stick to, if you are going to use the SketchUp to Unreal Engine method, stick to bringing in materials inside of Fab directly to Unreal Engine. First thing I do when I open up a new SketchUp project is I delete our reference guy. And then I go over to my materials accordion. And then I click on the home icon. And anything that's in the model, I can right click and delete. Alternatively, before we do anything, I can go File, Save As, and then it should pop up an option asking if you want to purge unused materials, styles, tags, etc. So I'll do that. And then I'll create a folder. Today I'll create a folder on my desktop. So we're going to call this SUE, SketchUp Unreal Engine. Maybe I'll call it SUE. That might make a little more sense. All right. And then we're just going to call this project 1. So what that does is it automatically deletes all the materials that were in use by the reference person that's visible when you first load up a project. Real quick, SketchUp comes basically pre-packaged with its own set of plugins and features. I do recommend extending SketchUp to have a few more options. If you're going to get into architectural visualization, you can always go to YouTube and look up like the top most recommended plugins to enhance your workflow and to speed up your workflow. For me though, I use libfredo tools, some of the extensions that I have, 1001-bit tools, which I believe is free. I use Datasmith. You can go to Google and search Datasmith for Unreal Engine and Datasmith for SketchUp. Also free plugin so that you can convert your SketchUp files to Unreal Engine or sync SketchUp directly to Unreal. I use Follow Me and Keep. With Sketchucation, I've downloaded a few plugins from there, which I believe are managed directly on the website. JHS Powerbar, Add Anchor Points. So I'm just naming off the extensions that I use in the event that you might want to go and check them out, see what they do. Chronos GLTF, Chris Fuller Tools, Shapebender, Cleanup 3, Unhide All Entities. and I believe there might be a couple more. Frito corner and joint push pull for quad face tools. And then I think solid inspector might be the last one that is a third party tool. You don't really need to know what any of these mean just yet. If at some point in this video or another video in the future, I talk more in detail about these tools, I'll go over them there. But just to let you know that my panel, my toolbar might look a little bit different from yours because I have some third-party tools enabled. Those tools are not necessary. You can really get started with the basic shape tools. Very first tool that I recommend playing with is the line tool. And you want to get familiar with how you use your mouse to navigate around the scene. It's middle mouse button to rotate around, let's say an object. You can hold shift while dragging the middle mouse button to just pan across. Once you get the desired orientation, you can hold shift to move left and right or up and down. And then you can use the middle mouse button, the middle mouse wheel to zoom. But if you have a more modern mouse, you might be able to do a tilt left and right on your middle mouse button. So when you click in the middle mouse button, you might be able to tilt it to the right or to the left to zoom in and out. And that might be a little more helpful than scrolling your mouse wheel. If you don't have those features, I do recommend doing a mouse upgrade. And that's, SketchUp for the most part is about as simple as understanding how to use those tools. But the first tool that I want to activate is the line tool, which I believe you can activate by pressing L on the keyboard. And then I want to draw a line from the center, from the origin, in any direction. As you can see that this line will snap to each of your axes. So you've got a red axis, you've got a green axis, you've got a blue axis. Blue is always up. Red is always forward. And then, green is typically, the side to side. So if I drag over to the left on the dotted green line, if a person was looking at you, this would be to their right. Right? If I drag over to my right, this would be to that person's left or to the left side of the object. If I drag backwards, back into the view, that would be drawing a line behind that person and then, up and down, etc. So one of the things that one of my drafting teachers at school, in high school, taught me is that there are 6 different ways to do everything. Essentially, if I wanted to draw a box, I could go in here and draw 4 lines, and then I can draw, a line upwards, and then create another box, and then I can connect all these lines to close these shapes, and now I have a box. Another way of doing that is just grabbing a rectangle, and then I could draw another rectangle. But then it starts to get a little bit complicated. I have to move some lines around. All right, well, that's not a quick way to draw a box. If I went to draw another rectangle, and then I press the R tool, the P tool to push or pull, I can then push or pull this face in one or the other direction to now extrude it to create my box. So you can draw a box using lines. You can draw a square or a rectangle and then copy and rotate that rectangle to build your box. You can draw a rectangle and extrude it to create a box. So various different ways to create any particular shape or object. And with that in mind, you can take the approach that might be most suitable for whatever your needs are at any given time. But before I get too deep in that, one of the things that I do recommend for anybody starting a new project is to get familiar with their window. In the window, you've got your default tray on, it could be docked to the left or the right. I believe by default it's on the right side. And in your default tray, you'll have information about any entity that you're editing. It could be a sphere, a cube, a line. If I draw a line in my scene, I can click on that line and it'll give me information about the line, how long the line is, whether it's a soft line or a smoothed, and whether that line is visible, locked, and how it's shaded, for example. I can also apply materials to any entity. So if I have a line or a face selected, I'd go into the materials panel to add a color or texture to that face, or delete any materials off any face. The components drop down gives me the option to manage and organize different components. A component is basically a fancy group. So if I were to draw a line and then another line and then another line and then another line, that is 5 components I just created. I just created 4 lines, and inside of those lines I have one face. It's 5 components because I can delete the face and still keep the lines. So I can double click on this to select the face and all the edges connected to it, and then for me, I've got a shortcut set up with the letter G on the keyboard to turn this into a group. Let me draw another rectangle off to the side, and we're gonna extrude this with the P key. And then I'll triple click. If I double click a face, it's only gonna select that face and its edges. I can make that a group, and then I can triple click all the other entities that were connected to that face to now make that a group as well. So I have 3 groups here. I have this group of this rectangle I just created. I have the group of this rectangle that I created on top of this box. And then lastly, I grouped the box itself minus the top part. All right, so these are grouped entities. In this group, you have 5 entities. Okay, inside of this group, I've got 5 entities. And let's see if I can guess how many entities are in here. We've got 4, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 entities. So 5 faces, several lines, but this is all one group. Now, if I move this group to collide with another group, the entities remain separated and they don't get attached to each other. And one of the biggest problems that a lot of users in SketchUp face is that they don't group or create components to their assets. And when they go about moving components or entities around in their scene, sometimes those entities will attach to each other, making it hard for you to manipulate a particular set of entities that are meant to be separated. So if let's say you're drawing a cabinet, and the cabinet's supposed to have cabinet doors on the front, and none of your entities are nested inside of a group, your cabinet doors will become connected to your cabinetry, and you won't be able to create any sort of dynamic adjustments to, let's say, open or close those cabinet doors or adjust them with ease. So it's important to understand how grouping works, and once you understand the benefits of using groups, you can then learn how to use components. So a component is basically a dynamic version of a group, whereas if I were to create a box here and leave this as a group, I'm going to move this over using the M button on my keyboard, clicking on a corner, and we're going to press Control so that we can copy this group. Now I'm going to right click the second copy that I made, and then we're going to make this a component. We're going to call this box, and then I'll do a move command again, pressing M on the keyboard. Grab this by any point, press Control, just tap it, you don't have to hold it, and move that component over. So now I have one group one component and then an instance of my component. If I were to go inside of my group and make an edit of the group, nothing would happen to the components. But if I were to go into one or the other component and make an edit of the component, its instance will also update. So it's like a dynamic group that allows instancing to happen. So technically, this box exists only once inside of my GPU or inside of the scene, but an instance of it is basically mirroring his existence. All right, so yes, it does exist twice in here, but there is only one box like this and it is unique. And when you're working with components, if you have multiple instances of an object in your scene, it's better to convert it to a component. Let's say you have you're building out a kitchen cabinet and 9 of 15 doors have the same dimensions. You want those 9 doors, or 8 of those 9 doors, to be instances of one master door with that set of dimensions. The same is true with handles, doorknobs, right? So if you have something in your scene that you can duplicate, and that's meant to have the exact same physical properties, you can convert that one thing to a component and then duplicate it across your scene. Another thing to also remember is that by default, your world coordinates, your axes, is at the 0, 0, 0 position and orientation. As in, your default world space is going to be right here where these axes lines meet. That is 0 on the x-axis, 0 on the y-axis, 0 on the z-axis, is this point. When you create groups, so let's draw a rectangle. Let's push it up and let's triple click it to select all the faces and edges and group it. I'm going to move it somewhere else in the scene, and then I'm going to draw a line on all of my axes just so that I can reference them later. I'm going to double click into my group, and as you'll notice, my axes or origin location updated to the origin inside of my group based on where this group was created. So if I create this object at the world origin and then I group it while it's at the world origin, it'll maintain the world origin inside of the group. Once I close the group or exit the group and then move that group somewhere else in the scene, the world origin stays where it is, but the origin of the group moves based on the location of the group itself. So if I double click again, you'll see the origin is now in a different position based on my group's placement. Same thing is true about orientation. So if I hit Q on the keyboard and I press up on the directional pad and I rotate this 45 degrees, if I double click into that group, my origin in the group is now also at 45 degrees. Something important to remember so that when you're inside of a 3D, real-time 3D program, any groups or components that you have will have their own individual origins based on their location inside of your scene. Super important for moving into Unreal Engine. Real quick, I have some shortcuts and I'll throw them on the screen really quick. Let's see, I forgot that my computer shut off one day. So it should be here. Throw these up on the screen so that you can take a screenshot and use these when you go to modify your shortcuts. Now I wonder if I can I can spelling, turn off spell check. There we go. All right, so I'll explain these quickly. Axes is my way of repositioning the origin of a group or component, or the world origin. Hide, pretty much self-explanatory. This is how I hide a group. I typically don't do much hiding of entities individually, like lines and faces. I'll group anything that I want to hide. Unhide, I use Alt-H. Hide rest of model means when you are inside of a group or you've activated or opened up a group to modify the nested components inside of it, this option hides the rest of the model inside of your scene. So let's move this window over and I'll demonstrate. I'll draw a rectangle, push it up, triple click it, group it. I'll draw actually I will, let's see, components, entity info. All right, I'll right click and make this a component. We'll call this box 2. And we're gonna move it and hit Control to duplicate it. So if I double click on my original box, I can use Control-Shift-H to hide other objects not associated with this group. Control-Shift-H will also reverse that effect by unhiding. Now, if I double click into a component, Control-Shift-H will hide all other entities that are not instances of this component. So I have an instance of this component, and when I make modifications to this instance, you can see that translate in real time. If I want to hide similar components, I can press Control-Shift-C. So let's double click into that component, Control-Shift-C. Now I can make adjustments to this component without seeing the updates of the other components. And these types of shortcuts help keep the program performant, because when you're modifying an asset and you have hundreds of other assets on the screen, you might not get the performance that's optimal for precision modeling, and that's super important for lower power machines, but machines that don't have really good GPUs or CPUs even. So you want to start using those shortcuts to your advantage to have a faster editing experience. Another thing I like to use is paste in place. All right, so I might want to take one of the faces from, let's say one of these models, and I might want to paste it exactly where it is inside of one of my components, though, in respect to its position and orientation in the world. I might want to take this face here and paste it back exactly where it is, but inside of this component. So I can go into this group, double click it, Control-C to copy, or Control-X. Let's single click it so that we don't delete the lines. I'm gonna do a Control-X, and this basically opens my box up. And then I'll click outside of the group. I'll go into my component, and before I do that, I'm gonna rotate this other component so that you can see how this translates. So let's do a Q and just rotate it 90 degrees. I'm gonna go inside of this box component, Control-Shift-H to unhide all the other entities. And then I'll do a Control-Shift-V to paste in place that face. So now that face is a part of this component. If I do a Control-Shift-C to hide other components, you'll see that it also pasted within the instance. So let's say I want to move that up. You see how that translates as a component. Now I can grab that component and move it. All right, So there are all kinds of reasons that you might want to use this feature. I often like to use the objects in my scene as references for where I'm placing or moving objects. When I create a course, I'm going to showcase more practical examples of this. Let's say you have an array of objects that are repeating across, a wall, like some light fixtures that are equally spaced. And you want that spacing to happen, let's say you want a light fixture to be exactly 5 feet away from each door in your scene. Instead of moving the light fixture by one of its corners and then trying to calculate the distance from each door, I can grab that light fixture. Let me show you an example. Let's copy this here, and let's get rid of all this other stuff. Let's assume that these are doors, and then I place a light fixture here, and then I group it. All right, let's say this is a building. I might want this light fixture to be in the exact same position as on this building as it is on this one. So I can press the move key while it's highlighted, and instead of clicking on a corner of the fixture itself, I can click on the corner of the building and then press Control to copy, and then basically place this on the corner of the other building, and it will be in the exact same position since I use those buildings as my reference to make that move. So this is all really simple stuff. It's understanding how the program works and understanding how to take advantage of the shortcuts makes it so much easier to focus on the mathematics of things. A lot of architecture, for example, is math based, and it's math and shapes. If you can understand math and shapes, you can design pretty much anything, or you can measure anything and then translate that over into the engine. This is especially useful if you are interested in, geometry and different forms of math that will, aid in your knowledge of shapes and how shapes are measured. I can't think of the exact word that I'm looking for, but it'll come to me randomly. Let's think. What's next? So we covered groups and components. It's important to keep your model as clean as possible. I have a clean with last settings shortcut, which only works if you have the Cleanup 3 plugin installed. And basically what this does is it removes stray lines, doubled edges, invisible geometry that's in no way attached to your model. So let's say, for example, I go into this component and I draw a random line here and here. You'll see that. Let me copy this again. I'm going to draw one more line in there. And let's say that these lines are no longer useful. Since this is a flat face, I can go over to Tools and Cleanup, or let's see, Window Extensions, Cleanup 3, and then Clean. We're just going to use the default settings and then press Cleanup. And what it's going to do is going to pop up and show me how many edges were deleted, in this case 2, how many components were purged, in this case 1. And as you can see, no problems are found, and those lines, those unnecessary or unneeded lines, got deleted. Those lines were not needed for this face to exist. And Cleanup, you have several options in there, but the primary option that I use is to delete unnecessary lines off of faces that aren't needed for the face to exist. Now, if I drew a line at the top of this box grabbed that line, went to move it upwards. Basically what it's going to do is going to create an angle, and since that is now two faces, I can no longer delete that line, otherwise it'll break the faces. So if ever you see there's a hole that gets put into your model when you delete a line off of a face, chances are that face is not actually flat, and there's an issue with the face if you expected the face to be flat, but deleting the line caused a hole in the model. That means you might have some hidden geometry in there that's that you cannot see, or smoothed lines that you can't see in the model because they're hidden. Let's see. So the shortcut for that was clean with last settings. All right. So anytime I want to perform that operation again, I can do a Control Shift D. Now I have shortcut for flipping objects across different axes. So if I want to flip this, from, let's say I want to mirror this object and I want to use the green axis as my reference to mirror this object, or maybe it'll mirror in one of these other directions. Let's see which one it is. I should be able to press Control Shift and B, Control Shift and G, or Control Shift and R to flip this object on the red, green, or blue axes. So let's try blue first. Control Shift B. Control Shift B. So it flips it in the upwards direction, since the blue axis is the Z axis. Let's do Control Shift G. All right, so it flips it along the green axis, and this is a shortcut I created. And then Control Shift R flips it along the red axis. All right, so if I move and Control click and copy and drag this over, I can do a Control Shift R, and now I have a mirror of that object. And it flips it in place. Now, if I still go and make edits to this component, those edits will be mirrored as well. I can also do let me think of how to explain this, some solid tool operations. So let's grab another rectangle. Let's make it a square. Let's push it up. And let's triple click and then press G to group this. We're going to move this box and press Control to duplicate it. I'm going to move it about halfway, and then I'm going to move it up also about halfway. And let's say I want to cut this box out. I should be able to select, I believe it's the first object, then the second object. And with the shortcut that I created, I have the option to do a subtract by pressing Shift S. Let's see if it's Control Shift S. Nope, just Shift S. Okay. So now the first object you select is the object that will be used to do the subtraction. Grab the second object with Shift and click Shift S. If I undo that, let's grab first object, second object. Let's do Shift T. So it does. Let's see what happens here. I don't think trim does anything. Let's do a union. Shift U. That joins them together. So shortcuts can be very helpful to prevent you from having to go into the tools, into the menu, finding the shortcut. But then once you create a shortcut, any tool that you do have in the menu should show that shortcut key next to the tool. All right, so those are quick ways that you can do solid group operations. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you press the space bar, you automatically go back into selection mode. So let me take both of these cubes, let's copy them over with move and control. So M and then control key. And then for one of these, I will select both. So the first one I want to delete is the one on the top. The second one, the one that I want to keep, is on the bottom. We'll do a Shift S. And then as you can see, if I move my mouse over another object, the subtraction command is, the subtraction operation is still in effect. So I can select this bottom box and then select the top box. And basically the last object that was selected after the operation is going to be used to perform the subtraction. And that will continue until you press spacebar or escape. So let me undo that and let me show you again what that looks like. Let's move this like so. Actually, I'm going to put it about right there. All right, so let's select this top object and the second object down and press Shift Subtract, Shift S. Now this object is selected, so whatever object I click next, it will be subtracted from. So if I click on this box, and then if I click on this box, the subtraction will continue to happen unless I press the space bar to stop that operation or escape. Same thing is true with union. Shift U, and it'll ask me what objects I want to select. So let me escape. If I press escape, it'll start the operation over. So object 1, object 2. Object 1 is already selected now, so I click object 2, and then this becomes object 1, so I can click object 2. This becomes object 1, so I can click another object, and then another object. And now all of these are nested in the same group as one object. If I were to delete this face, you can see how this is all one solid object. One thing you got to remember though, you cannot consider this open staircase design as something you could potentially fill up with water. Always assume that the inside of these solid objects is just solid, let's say material. If this were a poured concrete stair set, all of the inside of this face would be concrete. Okay, if this staircase was made of wood, all of this would be solid wood. Now, a way to kind of visualize a hollow wood staircase would be to use this tool here called offset. And then I can click on the side of the edge or the side of this staircase and then do an inner offset of the edge. And then I can press P on the keyboard to activate the push-pull tool. And then I can push this in. Let's see how far in we can go before we hit the wall. Or let's actually just move it over to the face. So I'm going to click on this other face, and then it should delete that is the inside of that. Now this is more of a hollow design. Again, the inside of this structure is meant to be solid. Let's say this is wood, it's meant to be solid wood. You cannot fill this up with water in the real world. But if I did a push-pull on this, grab this entire model, rotated it, now as you might be able to notice, let's say I delete this face, that's how deep that this, let's say, pool is. Okay, again, this could be considered poured concrete or something, right? This inside space right here. So, but you can pour water in here. I can press C on my keyboard to activate the circle tool. On this face, I can draw a circle. And by doing so, I now separate these two faces of this inner circle and the outer portion. So if I delete this, Control X, I can see now inside of my object. Let's undo that. And then what I'll do is I'll do a push-pull. So we'll grab the P tool. We'll push this downward. Let me use the middle mouse button to rotate the camera around, and then we'll click on this face. And now I have a hole where water could drain out of this. All right, so it's important to know what's a solid object and what's not a solid object. If you want to use solid tools to do Boolean operations like cutting one box from another, you have to be using two solids that are individually grouped to perform those operations. Now, inside of this group, I do have two individual solids, but since they're grouped inside of one group, it's assumed that it's one object. What I can do is triple click on one of these objects, Control X, and then my group is still activated. Click outside of that group, and I can do a Control Shift Paste or Control Shift V to paste this object in place. And I can either right click and make a group, make a component, or simply press the G button on my keyboard. And now I have two individual objects. These objects I can use to make Boolean operations, to cut from each other or join or attach. All right, so I want to attach these two objects. I can do a Shift U, and then I can click the second object, and now this is all one object. Alternatively, let's undo that. Let's click the first object. I want to use this object to cut this object. Shift S for subtract. I'll select the second object, and now we've cut that object. Simple, easy, really fast, like from thought to computer screen. You can take ideas and have them on the screen almost instantly if you understand the math behind what you're trying to do, and shapes, general shapes. For joint push pull, let's say I have multiple rectangles. I usually will double click these and hold shift to select them all. So double click one, shift, double click the second one, keep holding shift, double click the third, press G to group them. I'll go into the group, and then I can do a Control Shift H to hide the rest of my model. And let's see if this works because I haven't used it yet. Joint push pull, Control Shift J. Oh, my trial expired. But what that should allow me to do is, instead of having to individually pull a face up and then pull a second face up to match it, or double click a third face to then match the length that I extruded that face, I should be able to select multiple faces and then push those faces all up at once. And that is what the joint push pull plugin will allow you to do. Let's say that I create a circle. By default, when you create a circle, its edges are going to be connected or welded together. Inside of your entity info panel, you can see how many edges are in this circle or its resolution. In this case, there are 24 edges. Let's say I turn this to 3 edges. It's going to turn into a triangle. But I want to increase the resolution, multiply that by 2. That's 6. Let's go back to 24. Let's multiply that by 2 and then go 48 to have a really much higher resolution circle. Now, since those edges are welded, if I were to do a push-pull, you're going to see a smoothed set of edges going around that face. What that means is, if I go over to View and Hidden Geometry or Shift G, I can now see all the edges that make up that smoothed face. The number of edges will depend on the resolution that you set after you drew your circle. So Shift H, let's see, View, Shift G to hide those edges that are smooth. By default, they're hidden. You can't see them because you don't want to manipulate them. But if I were to go Shift G and click one of those edges and then right click and unsoften it, and then go Shift G again, now you'll see that there's an edge there and it's no longer smooth shaded, as though you took a piece of metal and wrapped it around this cylinder, and then there's an edge, let's say, where they meet, and it's a little bit hard because it's not welded together, right? If I take that edge and I right click that edge before doing an extrusion, I can explode the curve and turn these edges into individual entities. So now if I do a push pull on the face, all of your edges are going to show up. When you're inside of Unreal Engine and you have edges that are visible around a curved object that you want to be shaded smooth, Unreal Engine will display that as hard edges, and the shading, the lighting will hit those edges as if they were angled hard edges. So to prevent yourself from having to use the erase tool and then pressing Control to hide or soften those edges, not necessarily hide them, the quick way to do that before ever making any extrusion is to double click my circle, right click the edge, and then weld edges together. Now when I do that extrusion, they're automatically going to be welded. If I have a small hole, let's draw a rectangle on top of this. And then let's delete that face in the rectangle. I'm going to triple click this mesh, Control X to cut it out of our group. Click outside of the group and then Control Shift V to paste it, and then G to group that. Now that's an individual group. So I have these three solid objects and this object that is no longer a solid because it has a hole in it, exposing basically the solid interior, which can't happen in real life. Right, so imagine you try to cut a hole in concrete. You would have to see some internal faces here, or you'd have to cut the hole all the way through to the bottom. You can't just cut the surface of a rock or concrete and then see inside of it. It's impossible because it's a fully solid object. So if I go and move this box to intersect with this, and let's say I'm gonna move it upwards just a hair. Let's say I want to cut this box out, use this box as the object to cut out of the cylinder. I'm going to now select the cylinder as the second object, and I'm going to press Shift S. It's going to say one or more of these objects is not a solid or is locked, and I just hit OK. So what I can do is grab my solid inspector. So I can click on the object, press solid inspector. This is a third-party plugin, and it'll tell me that there is one face hole. So let's see if I can fix that by just pressing the button. All right, there's my face hole. So let's press fix. Now it closed that face hole and it looks like there are no more solid issues. So let's click on this other object again, click on my cylinder and Shift S. Now I can use that solid tools operation. So there are various reasons that you might not be able to use some Boolean operations with these solid tools plugins. Usually narrows down to having holes in your mesh. Another way to demonstrate that is to go inside of the group, grab this face. I'm going to move it upwards. So let's click on this face, press up on the keyboard one time, and then press Control. And now I'm duplicating that face upwards on the Z axis. So let's just move it up a little bit and then delete the original face. And it looks like a opened a can of beans or something, can of cat food or something, right? Dog food. If I wanted to perform that operation to do that Boolean operation, Shift S, it's going to say one or more of these objects is not a solid or locked. So I say, okay. If I go back and hit undo and then escape, I can try this again, but now we have this stray face here inside of the group. And because it's not a solid object or a part of this solid object, I still won't be able to do that operation. So Shift S, I still can't cut it. So my options are either to turn this face into a solid object by extruding it, or if it was just a line, I wouldn't be able to perform the operation either. One option is to Control X to cut it out, leave outside of your group, and then Control Shift paste, and then group that by itself. Okay. So several ways that you can do this. Or if I wanted to keep that in the group, I can grab this set of meshes that I want to use as my, let's call it my scissors. This is what I'm going to use to cut this cylinder. I'm going to Control copy that, double click into my group, and remember I have hide all other, hide rest of model enabled, Control Shift H, so I can't see any of the rest of the model. Now I can do a Control Shift V to paste this group within my group, and then triple click on my cylinder, group it, and then perform that operation from within the group, Shift S. Now I can right click and explode this group, and then I can leave out of the group. And now that gives me the cut I was looking for. So let's move this out of the way, or delete it, or hide it with the letter H. If I go to View, Hidden Objects, I can now see my hidden object. View Hidden Objects, let's turn that back off, and then go View Hidden Geometry. This is going to show me all my hidden geometry. I can see both at once. View Hidden Objects. All right, so let's take it all back. And one thing that I usually do while I'm creating assets is I adjust the axes for those assets either while I'm editing the asset or the group or the component, or after I've finished creating the component and finalizing its placement in the world. So let's say I want to have a couch. I'm going to draw a couch. Let me think about how I want to do this part. I'll just grab a line and just randomly draw on top of this box, where I want my couch back and armrest to be. So P to push this up, and let's assume that that's my couch. Remember that I said the red axis is the forward axis. Before I do anything else, this is a little close to these reference lines that I created here, and I don't want them to accidentally get connected to the couch. So I'm going to triple click the couch and press G to group it. And then when I click into that group, double click into it, you'll see that my new origin is at the edge of this group. Now, two things I could do. I could do a Control Shift A, which is a custom shortcut, to then place the origin in a new position. I want this origin to be in the center of the couch with the couch facing forward. So I'll click at the center point of the back of the couch. And now I can choose which orientation that I want the axes to be, the origin of the couch. So we're going to click out in front, right, which is basically on the green axis. And now I need to decide where I want the side of the couch to be, which is ultimately the left side of the couch, which would be to my right if I were facing the couch. So we need to draw out on the red axes that we want this to be our green axes. Another way to demonstrate that real quick, as you can see it updated. So now inside of the group, my origin is at the back at the bottom of the couch. The front is the red axis. Its left is my right, which is the green axis, and then upwards is the blue axis. If I click out of this group, you can see my world origin is actually here. So now I can move this group with the M button. I can grab the center or origin of the group, place it at the origin of the world, and then press Q. And when you want to lock the orientation of your effector, which is in this place, in this case, it's the rotation. If I want to lock the rotation to be on the Z axis, which is the up axis, which is how the couch would rotate around the Z axis, I press up on the keyboard. If I want to lock it on a different axis, I can press left. That'll lock it to the green. I can press right. That'll lock it to the red axis, and it'll rotate around the red axis. So I'll press up, grab it at the center, choose the point for which I want to make my rotation happen. And then down in the bottom right-hand corner, I can see the angle of rotation. It'll typically lock to sometimes to 45, and it'll lock to 90. Or while I'm freely dragging, I can let go of the mouse and then just type 90 and enter on the keyboard. So now, not only is my world origin in its place, the couch is sitting at the world origin. If I double click into it, my origin position is in the same place. Now, if I go in here and triple click and move the couch somewhere else, my origin is going to stay there. And if I click out of the group, my origin is still at the world origin. But let's undo that. Let's say I click out of the group and then I move the group itself. So when I double click into the group, my world origin actually moves with the group. So things to consider, because when you bring these models into Unreal Engine, the origin location and the location of the gizmo will be correlated to the origin location of the group. All right, and that's really the basics of SketchUp and the workflow of having a SketchUp model be prepared for Unreal Engine. The other thing that you have to then think of is how you want to manage your components, and then how you want to optimize and organize the names of the components that you've created. So if I go into my outliner, I can see that I have in project, this is project 1 is what this is called. I can see that I have one group here. The group is the couch. Typically any stray lines in the project won't get brought over into Unreal Engine. All right, so if you have stray lines that don't generate a face or that aren't connected to the edge of a face, they won't be exported over to Unreal Engine. They won't exist. All right, so I'm gonna copy this. So let's move this and then press Control and then copy this over. I'm gonna right click this other couch and then make it a component. We're gonna call it couch. Now under components, I can see all the components that I've made. I've got a box, which I can drag into the scene. I can drag another couch on the scene. Got this stair looking design and another temporary instance that I never named. These are all my components. Now inside of my components browser, I can right click on this box number 2 and delete it. All instances will be deleted from the model. So I press OK. Now that component no longer exists anywhere. I can grab this box and I can either click on it here inside of the component browser, right click, go to properties, and then it'll give me some options that I probably will never use anyways. I have some statistics. It tells me how many edges, how many faces there are. But inside of the components drop down, I can also rename it. So we're going to call this box. And inside of the entity info accordion drop down, the definition updates also as box. For instance, we're going to call this instance 1. So press 1, enter. Let's see if we can rename. I don't know how I just accidentally copied that over, but let's take this copy and let's see if we can rename this instance to 2. Typically when I do instance naming, I will do the main name of the object underscore 2. So instead of just 2, I'll say box underscore 2, or I can just do underscore 2. But I've found that box underscore 2 is more likely to translate over into Unreal Engine in a way that makes it easy for me to find them both in the details panel and inside of my content browser. So I believe that the definition is basically what the object is called inside of the content browser. And then inside of your details panel and inside of your world, you want to be able to decipher between the two instances so you can have a instance name so that you can know in the world which box is which. But they're both the same object, because if I modify the first object, you'll see that all the other instances will get modified as well. Real quick, I'm going to go ahead and change the origin point of this, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to draw a reference line underneath it, connecting a single line from one corner to the next. And then I'll double click into my group or component. We'll do a Control Shift H to unhide all the other assets in the scene so I can see that line. And then I'll do a Control Shift A to adjust the axes. Remember, red is forward, green is the left, my right, and then blue is up. So first we're going to click forward, and it should lock to the red axis. Or I can click on the center of the edge of this face, and then I can click to set the green axis, and then it'll automatically update my origin position to be the center of the box. So if I click out of this group, it's going to ask me would I like to update the component axis to match my modified axis, and I'll say yes. So I can now delete this reference line, and if I double click into my instance, my second instance of this box, the origin should show the bottom and center of that box. Same thing is true when I click into these instances of this couch, which these are instances. So again, we can say which instance is this? This is couch underscore 2. And then this instance is couch underscore 1. This is not an instance of anything. It's just some entities inside of a group. If I go in here and modify the height of the back of this couch, it's a mooey couch now. nothing else is going to happen to the actual components in the scene. But if I only have one version of this couch, it's fine just leaving it as a group. There's just no need to necessarily give it a name, because there is no, like, it doesn't exist as a component. But I can give the instance a name, and we can call this Mooey couch. If you're not familiar, Mooey is like a really upscale, bespoke furniture brand, like a luxury furniture manufacturer. So we're going to call this MOOI couch. And that should reflect down inside of my outliner. So let's close the components tab. Let's close the entity info. And you can see now I have Mooey couch, which is a group, as indicated by the solid square. And then I have couch number 1 and couch number 2 with the actual component name in brackets. So this is a copy of a single component added to the scene twice. The same is true with box 1 and box 2. It's a box component with their own instance names, and these little 4 squares in this icon basically lets you know that this is a component object. If you edit one of the components, the other components will also update. And then I've got this instance here which doesn't have a name, so we can either go into entity info drop down, or we can edit the name here. And I don't know if I can edit the component name, but we're going to try. So we're going to say stair _1, and then let's see if I can do brackets STAIR, enter. Nope. So it added the brackets inside of my instance name, which I'm going to delete inside of the entity info. And then I'll rename the definition in the entity info window to stair. So now everything's a component except for this custom couch, which it doesn't necessarily need to be because I only have one of them. If I want to attach this little square as, like, let's say a side table to my couch, and I know that it's always going to be in the same positioning based on the location of every instance of the couch, what I can do is I can copy that component. I have 2 ways of doing this. I can go into the component, triple click, grab all the entities, Control C to copy those entities, double click into my couch component, and then Control Shift paste those entities into my couch, and then move those entities into place. And let's say we use the arrow keys to constrain the movement of this box. So let's say about right here, and we're going to drop it down to the floor, press up to align it to the edge of the couch. So now this couch component has a couch, some entities that make up a couch, and some entities that make up a box. Obviously, if I press P to modify that box, it'll change the other component of the couch. But here's something else cool that I can do. Let's delete that. I can take this box here, the bottom corner. Let's move it on the Z-axis down to match the floor of the couch. Let's move it forward on the red axis, and then let's move it on the green axis to be closer to my couch. I can now take this side table thing and the couch and group them together. So this is a group, not a component, but inside of this group I now have 2 components. So I can still manipulate my components, and I can grab this other side table. Let's move it and constrain it here, and then move it back Let's grab this front corner, constrain it to the red axis to the front of the couch, and then constrain it to the blue axis to the bottom of the couch. And then let's just move it away from the couch a little bit. And then we're going to group those together. So now we have two groups which feature two components. If I were to edit this component, it would edit the other instances of that component in the scene. Now, if I were to go and rotate this component, let's say by the bottom origin, let's press Q, and I want to rotate this 90 degrees. Now, if I were to go to modify the parent component, let's say, you see that 90-degree rotation would have an effect on how the instance gets modified as well. So let's say I do want to stretch this out, but now this version, we're going to move it to be flush with the front face of the couch, and it's a long side table. Let's edit that one more time and make it a little bit higher. All right, so that is how groups and components work. And if you look over into the outliner, you can see you have multiple groups, and you should be able to rename those groups. So instance of this group is, let's say couch entrance. And the second one could be couch playroom. And let's say I want to change the name of this box to be side table or table side. I don't know. Now each instance of that will have its name updated. This is now table side. It's called box 1 as an instance in the scene. All right, so simple stuff. It might look overwhelming or intimidating, but really it's just shapes and groups and components. The outliner is really important for you to be able to see what's a component and what isn't, and if it's possible for you to create components. If it's possible for you to create components that you can then use to minimize the number of times that you duplicate an object in the scene. So I don't think it really makes sense to turn this couch and table group into a component. I can just move and copy the group if I want the same configuration to be somewhere else in the scene. Rotate it as I need to. Could even be something odd like that. But we're going to call this one couch porch. And any modification that I do to this group won't affect the others. So let's move this box here. But there might be times where you want to actually convert this to another component. So let's copy this over again, and then right click and make it a component, or press C on the keyboard. Actually, no. I know we have a shortcut for component. Let's figure out what that is. Shift C. So Shift C, and now it's going to give me a new axis, but by default it's going to be called couch porch because that is what the entity name was. Then we're going to set create, and we're going to double click into that, and we can change the axes again. Control Shift A, I'll put it in the center of the couch in the back. We're oriented to the front. And now my axis is updated. I'm gonna hit yes, we want those changes to be made. If I click into this component, now you can see that even still what lies within this component is a component. So I'm not sure exactly how this translates inside of Unreal Engine, but this is now a component in SketchUp that allows me to then make modifications to, let's say I move this couch around and I duplicate it in the scene because I want 3 configurations of this. I can then go and double click into that component and move the little table around, and it'll update for every component. So whatever reason you might need to have something duplicated across the scene, you can nest components within components. And once I'm done modifying that set of components, if I want to, I can go back and explode that component to turn it back into a group, but not necessary to do that. I don't think I can reconvert this to a group. The only way to reconvert this to a group and maintain its origin placement is to click into the component, double click into the component, select both objects, group them, click out of the component, and then right click the component and explode it. Right click the other component, explode it, or click both of these other components, right click and explode, and now you still have these 3 groups, which then you might want to go back and rename. So you've got couch porch. This could be couch bedroom, couch dining room, couch basement. And now they're not components anymore. So if I go and modify this, it will no longer affect the other groups. But all of the components can still be modified. All right, so you have a product, you want to bring it to the scene. Now, if I want to turn one of these into a custom variation, it being a bed, what I can do is click on this couch, right click it and make it a unique component. And then I would have to go into the entity info and change the definition to be bed. And then we're going to call this bed 1. Double click on that bed. And now I can move all the assets as needed. All right, and that's pretty much everything you need to know on the SketchUp side of things. Is just remember, you have to remember to update your axes. So if I want the axes to this to be, let's say the center of this rectangle here, I can draw a line as a reference. Control Shift, let's see, make sure. Let's double click into this. Actually, no, it's already where I want it to be, that's fine. But if I want this group to have its axes be at the center of this, I'm click into the group, Control Shift A, and I can modify the axis location. Let's double click this and do the same. Remember, red first and then green. Double click this, do the same. Double click here, do the same. then if I double click into the couch itself, you can see that the axis is in the right place for all of my couch components, as well as for my little side table. So let's assume that this is the front of the side table, and there is no drawers or anything. It doesn't really matter its orientation, but that is the axis of this side table. So if you double click into each group, you can see the location of the axes, which way is forward. Just remember into each component that when you modify the axes of a component, it will change the axes of all components. So let's double click into this little staircase, Control Shift A, and then let's use the back to set its origin, and then press yes, and make sure that this big couch is also got the correct origin. All right, so not only do my components have the origins that I want, as you can see where this blue line, this blue, green, and red line update to, but as do my groups. So all of my groups have the origin that I want them to have. And I'm going to set the origin of this bed to be the center of the back, and then escape, yes, and then set the origin of the group to also be the center of the back. So now the origin for each item is at the back and the center. So I can Control X to cut that big couch out of the way. I can grab these origin reference lines I made, delete them, and then Control Shift V to paste it back into place. And let's assume that this is my scene with, technically I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meshes, and then all these other ones are instances. So I can grab everything, press M to move it, and then Control to copy, and then I can just duplicate this across my scene. Control again, let's just put it somewhere random. Let's rotate it. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then I want to create an array of couches, let's say around all these assets. So let's move one of these and copy it out here, and then press Control or Q and then Control. And let's just say from here, we want to rotate it around like this. So as you can see, I just went around basically the entire scene, and this gives me like a approximately 345.1 degrees worth of assets. But what I could do is I can go 360. Let's see, let's type 360, enter, and then without pressing anything else, we're going to do /12, enter. And without doing anything again, I can go /24, enter. And now remember that I duplicated this couch and rotated it 360 degrees, so there should be 2 of them kind of stacked on top of each other. I can take one of those and delete it. But that is how you create an array around a particular point. You can also, let's take this bed group and let's move it, and Control click, and let's put it here. And then let's Control click and move it again like this. And this is like a nightclub type of setup. So we're gonna click and place it there. And then I'm gonna do X4, enter. And that duplicates it 4 times. I can now grab all 5 of these, press Q, we're going to just click on a random part of this one couch here. Then I can use a point on one of these other couches as my pivot for how I want to rotate this. Now it might appear as though I have, let's see, however, 53 components in the scene, but the reality is, since all of these are, except for this couch, let me see, did I convert this to a, this couch is not a component. So every instance of this couch can be modified. I can make this one twice as tall, and it looks like there are 3 of them. And I can make this one a little bit shorter and a little bit longer and a little bit thicker. All right, that's what you can do when it's not a component. So these are going to be 3 individual meshes. So those 3 meshes plus my stair component plus my regular couch component plus my side table component, that's 6 meshes, plus the bed component makes 7 meshes. So I have 53 instances in the scene, but there are only 7 meshes that should show up inside of Unreal Engine when I move this to Unreal, and not 53. So let's press File, Save. I don't need to worry about materials. We're going to purge anything that I'm not using, including components that are, or components that might be deleted, hidden, styles, tags, or anything else. Okay. And we're going to call this Mooey Couch Tall. I'm going to call this Mooey Couch just Mooey Couch. I'm going to call this one Mooey Couch Fat. Remember that it's not a component. And we're going to change this instance to Bed Basement instead of Couch Basement. So we got couch porch, couch entrance, couch playroom. It could be like leather couch, blue couch, red couch. That's how you can kind of adjust your instances. And the one thing I'm going to do is I am going to add a, let's say, a material per each component. So we're going to click into one of these couches. We're going to go to materials. We'll choose colors, so solid colors. And then I'm just going to grab any set of solid colors. I'm going to throw a solid color on this couch. And I think if I undo that, and I double click into it, Control A, and then throw that color on the couch as I'm editing the component itself, it should change the color of every instance of that couch. Alternatively, I can put a different material on each instance if I wanted to. So we're going to paint one of these yellow. So we're going to click out of the group, and then we're going to click into the group of, let's say, this one, and we're going to paint this one yellow. If it'll let us. It might not let us. All right, so let's try to do that with the other components and see what happens. We're going to give that a green color. Okay, so if I do edit the actual component, it'll update them all. But if I only modify a couple of instances without adding a color to the base component, I can create a differentiator just by applying some random color to the objects that I want to be unique, but they're still going to remain as part of my 7 meshes. All right, and by default, they won't have a default color, but the instance in the world will have a color applied to it, and that'll help me kind of distinguish which 2 I want to have as like some unique material on. So I'm going to go and grab another color. I'm going to triple click into this and then make this one like a purple. And then and because these are not components, it doesn't matter if we color them or not. I will color the stairs as, let's go black, and that will paint all the instances. So, you know, let's maybe go ahead and do add a color to some of these custom ones. See if I can find something more unique, like a brownish. And then something that's kind of orangish. Remember, I can press P on the keyboard or spacebar on the keyboard to disable any tool that I activated. All right, and I'll give these boxes, I'll keep these boxes with no material on them so that we can have these additional colors added as unique identifiers for those two objects. I'm going to save this, purge anything that I'm not using, and in the Datasmith, with the Datasmith tool, I'm going to press export. And then inside of my project folder I create on the desktop, we're going to call this project 1 and press save. And then we can start having a little fun. We can go into Unreal Engine. So let's do a 5.6 project. I'm just going to hit launch. Son's gonna be here soon, so I'm probably gonna mute the mouse once he mute the mic once he comes in here. First world problems, was looking for the remote to the window. We're gonna go in here and go into, I like to use the architecture. Discord overlay, cool. Let's see, games, architecture. I like to use the architecture templates, but to keep it simple, I'm going to do a game and third person template. We're gonna do blueprint, desktop, maximum settings, no particular variant. And then we're gonna call this project 1. I'm probably gonna delete this later. We're gonna save this inside of our 3D projects folder and hit create. It's gonna take a second to load up all of our plugins, tools. The very first thing you wanna do when the project loads up is to make sure you have modeling mode, modeling tools plugin enabled. So I'm going to navigate to plugins and search for modeling, and modeling tools editor mode, static mesh editor, modeling mode. I don't know what the difference between these two is. Let's check out my main window and see if we have modeling. Yeah, we got modeling. And then let's also check to make sure we enable Datasmith. So I'll go here, search Datasmith, and we got Datasmith importer. Datasmith content, we need Datasmith importer to be enabled. And it's going to prompt me to restart, so I'll go ahead and restart now. And remember where the origin of this scene is, behind this one couch right here. So inside of my Unreal Engine environment, so this scene, the origin is here behind this one couch. inside of my Unreal Engine environment, and you press the right mouse button to navigate the scene, plus WSAD keys or up, down, left, right arrows. And then you can you can scroll with the mouse wheel to change the speed of your camera viewport movement. So scroll up to make it move faster, scroll down to slow that movement down. So this is the center of my scene. And let's delete everything. So let's grab all these random meshes that we have, which are going to show up in a folder under playground. I want to delete everything except for floor. I'm going to kind of right click and drag inside of my viewport and then press delete. And we're going to save, control save. And then we'll go to the quickly add to project drop down. Under Datasmith, we'll do file import. I'm going to go to desktop, and then we're going to search for that folder we created, SUUE. I'm going to click on the U Datasmith file, double click it. It'll ask me where I want to import these assets. Under content, I'll right click and create a new folder. I'm going to call this imported _ assets. Inside of that, I'm just going to create another new folder called couches or project 1. And we're going to import everything into there. We're going to import geometry and materials and textures. Don't need any lights, cameras, animations. We're going to replace any materials that we do have in here later. But as you can see, probably not built to scale, but all of the stuff that I created is now inside of my Unreal Engine scene. We got a custom material on this mesh and a custom material on this mesh. And inside of my content browser, let's go to imported assets, project 1. It did make a folder for me under the name of the SketchUp file, which is good to know. But let's go to geometries. And you see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 meshes. It's not 53, just 7. Now, all of these couches are populated as instances across the scene. So, alongside the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 materials, which these, I have 7 materials as base materials for each one of these meshes, there are 2 additional materials that are unique for 2 of my little side tables. So 7 meshes, 7 materials plus 2 additional materials. That's 16. Technically, that's 16 draw calls on the GPU, right? So let's go back into the content drawer and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 meshes. Let's go back into materials. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 14, 15, 16. So 7 meshes and then 9 materials. So that's 16, technically 16 draw calls. You can call this 17 draw calls because there's going to be a master material created, unless you have something in here with opacity, translucency as well. So let's call this 18 draw calls because each material only consists of a vector color. There's no texture or image on any of the materials. All right, if there were images, there would be a diffuse map, which is like a graphic that kind of shows the surface of the object. There would be a normal map that show the bumpiness of the object, or how the light hits the object. There would be a noise map, right? So all of those additional textures on top of a material will add a draw call to the GPU. Since we don't have any of that, let me see, there should be a quick way to check the number of draw calls for the scene, but your GPU basically has to call for the object, which is a draw call. And if each object is an instance and you have that object in the scene 50 times, you're only calling for the object once and then instancing that one call in the scene by the coordinates of their placements. If you have 50 unique assets, so let's say I go back and we're going to take everything I just brought in here, which will populate inside of an actor. We're going to hide it. I'm going to go back into SketchUp, Control A, right click, explode, and then we're going to right click, explode again, and we're going to explode everything. All right, I'm going to save this, Control Shift S, or File Save As. I'm going to purge everything unused. I'm going to call this Project 2. And then we're going to export this as a Datasmith file, also called Project 2. And then in Unreal Engine, hey buddy, that's for you. Those are shoes. Let me finish this real quick and then I'll open them for you. You got pink? Good job, buddy. So if I go back into Unreal Engine, we go into Datasmith, File Import. We're going to import project number 2. It's going to ask us where. We're going to put that also in our project 1 folder, and it should create a subfolder. Press OK. We're going to import geometry and materials and textures, and I'll show you the difference. So I'll go into the content browser, go to project 2 and geometries, and it looks like it brought in the entire model as one piece of geometry. Since nothing was added into a group, it grouped it all for us. So that's one mesh for the whole scene. And then if I go into materials, we have the same number of materials. So 9 instances, 1 master material, that's 10 draw calls, plus 1 object, which is all this is now 1 object. So it's 11 draw calls. It's even cheaper on the performance. The last variation of this would be, I open up SketchUp and let's
What? I'm the Lorax, guardian of the forest. I speak for the trees. So you're telling me
I'm just now realizing like I'm talking to myself over here. I don't know when I shut my audio off, but I must have been talking to myself for quite a minute. This is a digital twin of my basement that was all done inside of SketchUp. And the same methods that I have used inside of SketchUp were used to create this. Totally interactive.
what? I'm the Lorax.
I can click and turn things off. I can change meshes. I can rotate meshes and grab them and move them around. I can turn lights on and off. I can open doors. I can pick things up, look at it. This has a real clock, but I need to figure out the, this is supposed to be a 05, not just 5. That's something I gotta fix. But yeah, I can pretty much pick anything up, inspect it, put it down, throw it. I can turn on and off lights throughout the whole house. As you can see, an emissive is added to the toggle light switches so I can find them. Turn off the air conditioner. Turn everything back on. Push myself through doors or grab them and pull them. All SketchUp.
Ball fake you. Go back door. We're talking about.
And then physics objects. inspections. I can inspect the object. But SketchUp made all that possible. Most of that anyways. Let's see. Recent projects, project 1. Let's go back to this project. Let's continue switching. And I think I was muted for quite some time after my son came in or something. Muted at some point, not sure what point. But long story short, with SketchUp, you want to get familiar with how components work, and you want to work with components for every asset that you have in your scene, and you want to keep those assets separated throughout the entirety of your design process, and keep assets within components, and then modify the axes of each component. For every item that's duplicated in your scene, it should be a component. And then, you know, anything that can live as one entire static mesh, even if it's multiple assets, you can combine meshes, assign a different material slot to each item or part of the mesh that you want to be a different color, and then that particular item will then reflect in your details panel to have one static mesh and then a variety of material slots. All right, so this is one mesh item. The efficient way to have multiple items is to have one mesh per instance. So couch is its own instance, and if I go over to the content drawer, you can see that here. Okay, I usually go in and I rename everything, so MOI underscore couch underscore control A, copy, paste, delete, go over here, grab this one, F2 to rename, control paste, and then we're just going to call this tall. And then this one we're going to call small or short. So we got Mui couch short, Mui couch tall, stair, table side, which I call it table side instead of side table. In the event that I have more tables in the scene, I'll call them table kitchen and table this and table that. That way, all of my tables in the scene, if those meshes are in the outliner, they all show up alphabetically to where all the tables are next to each other. So technically this would be better named as couch underscore Mui. Then I'll copy that, go to the next mesh, F2. Then we're going to say paste underscore short. Okay, paste underscore tall. And all these static meshes, if I were to pull them in the scene at once, they should all face the exact same orientation, and for the most part be the origin should be in the exact same place for each item. So now I can grab one of these items, for instance, and move it out of the way. Grab this one, move it over. Let's grab the bed version, move it over. Let's grab this thick version. Okay. And then let's grab the stair and the table. Now, as you can notice, for the most part, these regular couches all have the same location, like the same, their geometry, the back of the geometry is in the same place, as well as for the couch. This one is slightly pivoted forward, but the front of each one should be in the same place. So if I overlap these, you can see how like the back where your back would be are flush. So I think about how to adjust the axes in SketchUp for each component and each group. And that gives me a variety of assets that I can now work with to populate my scene. And then all I have to do is Alt and drag this around and orient it how I want, to now have duplicates of that. And if I need to adjust a particular material, and I know all these couches are going to share the same material, let's say we're doing this for a church or a corporate office, then I can easily go in there and modify my material for all the items in the scene. All at once. So easy peasy. Very fun way to kind of get started. These methods also apply to things like architecture. So, but the method of going about optimizing those meshes for Unreal Engine might be a little bit different. For me, I personally like to combine my walls, floors, and ceilings as one large mesh, one solid mesh. And then I'll cut out or do some sort of Boolean to expose the openings for doors and windows. I don't do thin sheetrock. I don't do 2x4 studs. I don't do the insulation part of the wall. I do from the outer sheetrock to the outer sheetrock of any rooms that are facing each other. And I create that as one solid block attached to floors and walls. And then in those openings, I'll add a door, and around those openings, I'll add trim. I'll disable any collision for the trim and have enough space between the structure of the building and the doors so that I can have collision around the doors and have those doors swing open and closed without colliding with the mesh of the floor or the mesh of the foundation of the building. So if you think about it, when you pour concrete inside of a house on the floor, especially in the basement at least, the concrete goes across the entire basement. And then on top of that basement would exist the carpet and any flooring or tile. And then on top of that layer would start the baseboard, quarter round, and trim. So with the understanding of real estate development and subcontracting for building in mind, I understand that I need to design my meshes in a way that I can add floors or make space for floors and tile or any other material that might sit on top of the foundation, or you say in our case it could be wood planks, wood, plywood, and then above that space is where I would build out my trim, my quarter round, my baseboards. But all of my trim would exist in a group, and I would try to instance anything that I can populate around the scene, like doorknobs. I have one doorknob model, and some people make the mistake when they send me, even architecture firms do this, they'll send me a BIM model, export it from Revit, and I don't know if it's a Revit thing, and it could be a naming mechanism, or they're not understanding how instances work in terms of like the deliverable to Unreal Engine. But it'll be 100 different doorknobs in the scene, all with different pivot points based on their location compared to like the world origin. Whereas I systematically set up all of my doorknobs, like I bring one doorknob into the scene, change its pivot point to where if you were to twist it and rotate it to open it, that it rotates around the appropriate pivot point. And forward is like if the doorknob was facing you, if you were looking at the door to pull it towards you, that would be the orientation of the doorknob in the scene. And then I would convert that to a component and then populate every other door with that doorknob. You can play Minecraft on your tablet. What? No computer during school days, okay? Don't drop your phone. Don't let your phone drop on concrete and crack. And there you have it. I would love to answer any and all questions people may have and create one more practical project. My plan, I'll try to do it this week, is to very intentionally go in here and create a series of videos where I have an itinerary of things to talk about. And it gives you this more linear experience that you can kind of design with me and go like take a hands-on approach. But there you have it. It's very simple. It's very fun. One of the things that I do like to do if I'm in SketchUp and I understand that certain parts of the model are going to have a shared material, I will put a single color to represent that material on all of those assets, on those components, so that when I bring a new material into Unreal Engine, let's say from the Fab Marketplace, I can go and search for something. Let's say I've got couches, tables, let's say wood. And let's see if we can find a free wood material. Price lowest first. And filters. Seamless wood planks PBR. I'll grab this. Don't know how I feel about it. It looks like it's more like a floor material. So let's maybe find something that is, let's see, wooden sphere. Is this a material? It's an object. We're going to look for a material. Which usually show in the form of a sphere. So categories, materials and textures, and ash veneer sounds good. We'll do medium quality, add to project. And what happens is under Fab, Megascan, Surfaces, Ash Veneer, Medium, Quality, you have this folder, you have a material, and this is going to act as the master material, and then you have the textures for that material. The very first thing that you can do is right click that master material and create a material instance. And then I'll call this MI. Oh, that is a material instance already. So actually, delete. If it says material instance, then it's a material instance, but we're going to rename it to MI and ash underscore VENER. And then if I go to the folder itself, let's see, materials, where is the master for this? The master is, let's search, is under Fab Materials Standard, and it's more so an engine asset that I can't really edit. So that's fine for now. So we know that this is a material instance. But let's right click, duplicate that instance, and we're going to call this MI ash v2. And then I'm going to double click on this, and we're going to change a couple of parameters just to make it look slightly different. So base color tint. Let's set it to be a little bit darker and a little more on the red side of things. It's okay. And save. So So now I have two materials. So let's go Fab, Megascan, Surfaces, Ash Veneer, Medium. Keep that folder name, Materials. And inside of my viewport, I'm going to grab this one unique mesh. Let's go again to perspective, change the near view plane to 0. And this mesh in the details panel, I will have the option to add a unique material. So we're going to add V2 here. So in the content browser, let's just navigate through here so that I have it on the same screen. So Fab, Megascan, Surfaces, Ash Veneer, Medium, Materials, Ash V2. I'll click it, and then I'll click on the arrow icon to place this material there. But if I click on the item and Control E to open up the object editor, I can replace the default material with the Ash Veneer. And now everything inside of my content browser, every mesh is going to have that variation, except for the custom one that I changed and the one that I still haven't modified yet. So let's create another material instance. So I can go in here, right click, duplicate, and mi ash underscore v3. And let's just change this one to have a tint that's more kind of like this teal-ish color. Okay, I can click on the search icon, or it's already inside of the content browser. So let's get that out of the way. Click on this static mesh, and in the details panel is where I will replace the material, because all the other instances are now going to have no. Don't ask for any more candy today if you're going to be rude and unappreciative. I'm working with my son on respect, so him and I are going to have a serious conversation after I'm done streaming. Okay, so as simple as that is, I can go into Fab again and find another material, and we're going to call this plastic or marble. Just grab a random marble material, medium quality, add it to the scene, and then I like to go ahead and change the name of the material itself to mi, whatever this is. So Fab, it's called TAVERA marble. And while that's selected, I can go into the model editor, mesh editor window, and I can change the little lamp to have this as its primary material. So now if I go back to my scene, all the instances share that material. So I've got my two custom materials for my little side table. And all the lamps share a material. So a very easy way to go in and add materials to replace those default materials that we brought in from SketchUp. And typically when I do that, I'll go back into the folder where I imported that object. So project 1, materials, we'll find that white material, which is default. And now I can delete it. Force delete. There's nothing kind of calling for it. And if I have a problem with saving, typically what I would want to do, and I think this might be in the details panel, see data layers. For each object, it's possible sometimes you'll have a data layer that's connected to Datasmith. When you can't save your project, you need to delete the data layer out of the Datasmith data layer out of the mesh. But everything's looking good. Like, this is not a great practical example, I don't think, but I think it kind of gets the point across that we're using SketchUp as our foundation for organizing our assets and determining which ones are going to share materials or share meshes. And we want to reduce the number of materials and meshes as much as we possibly can. So we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 materials. What I could do is move those materials over into my materials folder. But since they're fab materials, I don't mind keeping them there for this particular project. But if I were wanting to package this project and share the project or sell the project, I would want to bring all of my materials into one material folder, have them all named accordingly, and then have them share a master wherever possible. We want to reduce the draw calls as much as we possibly can. And that's really what this is about, draw calls. So happy to answer any other questions. You can see that primary material got updated on all these meshes. And then I would basically do that for every other object. And you can go into modeling mode and edit materials to, add additional materials to each mesh or modify the materials. But when you go into the details panel of that object and then modify the materials there, these material slots only override the base material for the object. So there's element 0 and element 1. Basically, that means material 1 and material 2. If I go to edit materials, you can see what the primary materials are, or I can do a Control E and open up the mesh editor, and you can also see what those materials are. But if I were to pull from the content drawer a random material on this mesh, so we're going to use this kind of pinkish fuchsia color on that part of the mesh, and then we're going to use red on the lamp. We're only overriding that material because still in the mesh editor, our primary colors are this ash veneer and this Tavera marble. And then in the material editor for this object, edit material, you have veneer and marble. And it's going to say the selected component has a different material set than the underlying asset. Asset materials are shown here, and material sets that are overriding the asset materials are shown in the details panel. So if I click this arrow, this will revert back to its default value. But I'm free to override that whenever I wish without affecting all the other models in the scene. So I can grab this box, override its materials, grab this chair, override its materials, or I can click on the chair and do a edit materials. And then we're going to click on this kind of bronzed color, and then actually we're going to do this bluish color or yellow, and then we're going to put that in the empty material slot, and you'll see the tops of all these couches update. Just remember, we changed the color of this couch, but let me go ahead and update the top of all of the couches. Hit accept. And then the overrides are still applied to this mesh we edited in the details panel, but all the other couches got updated because there is no override. So in the details panel, I can have this couch selected and then click the back arrow to revert the materials back to their default. You can also edit UVs this way. So for each side table, let's bring two side tables close together that have somewhat varied material. So let's grab this brown one. Let's move it here. Let's grab this green one, move it here. And then I'll go into modeling mode. And I don't know if you can see that material very well, but if I click on one of these assets and I go into project UVs, I can change the projection type to box, click on auto align, auto fit align, and then I can set the dimensions to, let's say, let me zoom into it real quick. Let's say I want it to be really small, so 0.1 tab, 0.1 tab, 0.1 tab. That's extremely small. So maybe let's see what 1 looks like. 1, 1, 1. It's a seamless material. That looks all right. Zoom back out. Let's hit apply or accept. And you can see that the UVs for these also changed. Let's do it again with the bigger value, edit materials, or I'm sorry, project UVs, auto align fit. And we're going to do, let's say 10 by 10 by 10. And you can see that grain is so much larger. I'm not editing the UVs in the material, I'm editing the UVs on the mesh. So every mesh is going to update when I hit accept. So now all of them have a large grain. So your UV projection, you don't have to do UVs in SketchUp or any other 3D program, but you also have the power to transform UVs individually. So I can choose a face, I can pick exactly where the UV is, pick another face, I can rotate. Let's set the rotation to 45. Okay. And there you have it. So all of them will be updated. If you want to make this a unique mesh or add a UV mapping to the material itself, you can then adjust the material UV and potentially set up some form of like world aligned variation to where you can have different UVs for each mesh instead of them all looking like they have printed the same material on a vinyl, right? But easy way to manipulate meshes. Modeling tools is also a godsend because you can polygroup edit, decompose, and then like physically manipulate the mesh and create something extremely unique. So let's take this one, for example, and pull it out like so. And then I'm going to bevel that edge. I'm going to set this back to 0. Set the round weight to something really small. Subdivide it. And let's see. Set the round weight back to something positive. And now we have a custom table. Accept action. And then I can go back and accept the polygroup edit. Project UVs again. Auto align fit. And this will give me a much better aligned UV projection. Disable my rotation and see how I can kind of modify this to look more appropriate, to where these lines aren't like just absolutely breaking up on the sides. You know, or alternatively, I can do something like a cylinder, auto align, enable that 45-degree, rotate it this way, and that might give me a more accurate projection around the whole thing. Okay, accept, and now all of my meshes have gotten updated. For each mesh, I can now go in and, you know, let's say go to the details panel, double click on the material, and I have control over, depending on where you get your material from, base color, specular, so I can adjust the specular. Let's make this to be a little less shiny. Let's get a good camera angle to where you can see how the sunlight's hitting it. I can enable minimum roughness to make it look more or less rough, maximum roughness, so I can make it look super reflective and shiny, or a little more realistic. You know, you just play around with it, enable normal adjustment, make it look a little more worn if I want it to. Let's see what else is on here. Enable displacement. In order to enable displacement, I would have to first see if there is a displacement material, which maybe there is, but the mesh would have to have nanite enabled before displacement would work. Then I'd have to have tessellation enabled in the project, etc. Blah blah blah. We're not going to do all of that. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Close this. I'm going to go into polygroup edit. I'm going to grab all the faces that are connected to a rounded edge, and we're going to merge those into one face. I'll do the same thing on the side. Grab all of these, merge the back, those two triangles, merge, bottom, and then the side. And then accept. I'm going to go polygroup edit again. We're going to just deselect the selection filter for nodes and edges. Just to keep the face enabled, hit select all. And actually I want to merge these edges. So let's select all of these faces. And we're going to see if we can merge that together. and then select all and recalculate normals, and then hit accept. And this will give you a little bit more of a smoothed look. I don't know if you noticed before, but the transition from the top of this down had a little sharp line. Let me see if I can undo. Now you can see that line right there. It doesn't look super smooth. And it's because if I polygroup edit, Control Y, and merge those seams together, it smooths it out, and it takes away the emphasis on the separation of those edges. Same thing pretty much happens with rounded edges here. All right, so generally you can modify the UVs for something like a lamp and make sure they're aligned appropriately to the item. Do all your UV adjustments, adjust the parameters, set the materials that you want, place the lamp on top of the table, and then do a merge using the table as the first input object, the lamp as the second input object, and then convert the table mesh into a table and lamp mesh. So if I look at my details panel at the static mesh, I can browse for this in the content browser. See if I can bring that in the content drawer. Let's go to the content drawer and imported assets, project 1, geometries, and here you go, table side. If I double click it, you can see it is a single static mesh. Now it looks completely different to what it did inside of SketchUp. So let's save it. I could even go further and like really adjust this thing. I'm going to move it back. Please stop, Zeppelin. We're going to adjust this to be, instead of scaled as at 1, like this is its full size, I'm going to lock the scale and set it to 10. Make it huge. Let's move it back some. In my modeling mode, I'm going to change the rotation to be 0. Okay. And then we're going to go to, and I think this is relative to the child actor that it's placed inside of, or the parent actor. So if I click on that parent actor, I can set this also to be 0, and then hit F, and then move this table now back over, so that way you see that it's aligned to the world. And then I'll go into modeling mode and we will bake transform, and you'll see that the scale changed from 10 to 1. Now inside of polygroup edit, I can do an edge select on both of these edges, do a bevel, and we can make it a very tiny bevel. It doesn't have to be huge. As you can see, we can make it a very tiny bevel. Or we can make it just something like that. Looks all right. Accept. Then I'll grab this side, the top, and all of this could technically be one. We can merge this if we wanted to. I'll keep it as is for now, but we're going to select those and do a recalculate normals and accept. And you visibly can see a seam here since they're separated. And I can keep that seam there, or I can project UVs again. Auto align fit, rotate it, and let's have a look. Now it looks a little bit better. So let's do 30 by 30. and see first what this looks like. Still has a little seam there. So what I'll do is polygroup edit. Let's grab all of this and see if this makes it different if we merge these, and then recalculate normals and accept. And then let's do another project UVs. So it might be better to do, let's see, box align. Let's do 50 by 50 by 50. Rotate it. Or box projection might be even better. So not bad. It looks all right. Except, as you can see, all those tables look absolutely huge, but I can go back to my scale and set it to 0.1, and then bake transform and accept, and now all my tables are scaled appropriately again, but they have this nice bevel. Look at how beautiful. So just like some quick easy tools to say, hey, I don't have bevel tools inside of SketchUp that I'm comfortable with using because it's gonna break my SketchUp model, but you can go into Unreal Engine and create those bevels directly with the modeling tools, and then project UV with the PBR material applied. You can see the material and how it changes. You can adjust the scale of the items to make it easier to do the edits, and then rescale them, and bake the transform. And now every single item is updated to be higher quality, to look better. So from a distance, you're going to have a more pleasant viewing experience and a much better architectural visualization experience, because you're adjusting your SketchUp model to now be a high poly asset instead of just a bunch of lines. So that's all I got for you today. I hope that something in there was useful, and I hope that that brings up questions that I might not know to provide the answers to. And I hope that gets somebody excited for the courses that I am about to start making. They're going to be extremely cheap, but I will be adding to those courses perpetually. And my goal here is to give you the inside scoop of both SketchUp and Unreal Engine in one course, for architectural visualization primarily, but just for having that workflow to create your own models and end up with something that looks something that you are proud of at the end of the day. That looks great. All right, take care.